Welcome again for coming out this afternoon for the Sensible Assessment Series. My name is Abe Christ from the Performance Office. As a reminder, this is a monthly community of practice to share ideas about implementing sensible, balanced assessment systems. And then the purpose of it is to foster a deeper understanding of the variety of assessments and tools made available by the Performance Office at the CSDE. In this meeting, we will share information regarding sensible assessment and then be joined by some of our colleagues, our district partners, who are going to share some of their practices. In particular, today, we're focusing on the uses of the NGSS interim assessments. So thank you. Cheers to our district partners who are here today. Also to many of my colleagues who are on today, in particular, Jeff Gregg, who really put this community of practice together, and also the attendees for coming out as well today. So thank you. A couple of reminders about the community of practice. The link to the deck is in the chat, so you can catch the slide deck there. We are recording this training, so if you have to leave early or you want to share it with one of your colleagues, we will post it on our training webpage and circulate it out to all the attendees after the webinar. Please be mindful that you are on mute, and we will take some time to answer questions using the raise hand feature during the presentation. So today's agenda, real quick, we're going to give you an overview of sensible assessments very quickly about the NGSS assessments, and then we're going to turn it over to our colleagues from our districts who are attending today, from Greenwich, Tara Fogel, Winchester, Rachel Manzer, and Berlin, Adam Leonard. Again, Tara, Rachel, and Adam, thank you for taking the time to be here today. Then we'll have a minute to do some Q&A, and then Jeff will cover some of the additional resources that are out there and available. So as a reminder, this is our third in our series of 5 for the Sensible Assessment webinars. If you are interested in the other 2 that are coming in April and May, you can hit on the links here to register for those. Those will be on Smarter Balanced interims, and also looking at Smarter Balanced interim results a little bit more in May. All right, so just a little bit about the Connecticut Sensible Assessment System. It's more than just a summative assessment, but it offers a different set of tools for various purposes, in particular formative assessment resources and interim blocks that help support and monitor progress throughout the year. And of course, our summative assessment that evaluate the overall academic achievement at the end of the year. The purpose of this webinar is really to help focus on those high quality tools, the NGSS interim assessments that support instruction. If you click on this image here, it will lead you to our page of our Sensible Assessment student assessment webpage. And then this is a slide that outlines, as I mentioned, the 3 types of assessment out there, really formative, interims, and summatives. We will be focusing on the interim learning between cycles, important part of learning today only, and not summative and not the formatives. All right, Jeff, I'm going to kick it to you to tell us a little bit about the NGSS interim assessments.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you today. I'd just like to take a few minutes to go through some background information about the NGSS interims, including some of the available resources to support their use. So the table here shows the current number of interim items broken out by grade and the type of item, including the longer item clusters and the shorter standalone items. New items were added last December. And included in the items are all of the interaction types that students will see on the annual summative assessments. So all the NGSS interim items have been reviewed by committees of science educators and field tested with students at grades 5, 8, or 11. And the current plans call for additional items to be added each year. So we do hope to do that again next fall. Next slide, Abe. So there are several helpful resources for use with the NGSS interims, including these 2 documents. Both can be accessed through the main CSDE interim assessment page linked on this slide. The overview shown on the left can be used as an easy reference for commonly asked questions, such as how do teachers access the interim items and the corresponding answer keys. And the second document on the right focuses on various ways that the NGSS interims might be used, which we'll explore further in this webinar. I'm going to be sharing a few slides from this second resource. Next slide. So all of the NGSS interim items are based on a shared understanding of how students learn science most effectively. This includes exploring phenomenon or problems from the real world, using the 3 dimensions in the science standards, and engaging in sense making that integrates those 3 dimensions. There's also an emphasis on fairness and equity that accounts for the wide range of student backgrounds and experiences. Together, these represent the key shifts in science education since the adoption of NGSS. Next slide. So one way for educators to get started about thinking about the uses and purposes of the interims can be through this two-page practice brief. It was developed under the guidance of Dr. Todd Campbell, professor of science education at the University of Connecticut, along with other science educators, including some in Connecticut. This brief can help guide educators through important issues to consider and can be accessed on the STEM Teaching Tools website. If you have never checked out that website, it's a great resource, so I would definitely advise you doing so. Go ahead to the next slide. So these are some of the broadly defined ways that the NGSS interim assessments can be used, including as practice for students taking the state summative assessments, to familiarize educators with the NGSS assessment items, and to inform and support student learning in a variety of ways. So our district presenters will elaborate further about how they are using the NGSS interims in their classrooms. Next slide. So today, again, we have 3 presenters, Tara, Rachel, and Adam, and we're going to start with Tara from Greenwich. So I'll turn it over to you, Tara.
Great. Thanks so much, Abe. I'm just going to check. If I go like that, does that work for you too? I can navigate slides on my end. Yes, no? Okay. Everybody hear me? Okay, I'm seeing the head nod. Perfect. So yes, I'm Tara Fogel. I am the K Science Coordinator at Greenwich Public Schools, and I'm going to tell you a little bit today about our approach, the things that we do in grades 3 through 5, and the things that we're doing in grades 6 through 8 as well. Abe, you can move to the next slide. We also have some professional learning supporting the IABs and support from myself as a coordinator. You can go to the next slide. So in grades 3 through 5, we embed IABs in our curriculum documents, starting in 3rd grade with a little bit of exposure, increasing that more in 4th and then again in 5th. We have scaffolded expectations for how teachers are using the IABs in grade 3. Those get a little bit further removed in grade 4, and then we ask students to participate independently in trying out the IABs in grade 5. Coming out of COVID, looking at the middle school level, we actually utilize some of the grade 5 IABs with our 6th grade students. We get a pulse check on how they're doing. Then through grade 6, 7, and 8, we have a bit more increased accountability in terms of I, as the coordinator, am checking in to see how many students are logging in and trying out the embedded IABs in the different units for middle school. We ask that teachers work through 3 to 4 IABs with their students individually logging on at the middle school level. Outside of the 3 or 4 that are embedded in our curriculum, we use many other of the IABs as teaching tools throughout the school year. You can go to the next slide. And here's a sample of some slides that were included in one of our 90-minute program meetings. We have release time on Wednesdays for teachers to get professional learning. This is what I did recently for grades 3 to 5 teachers. I focus on exposure and some different ways for teachers to expose students to the IABs. Next slide. What I found is that some of our teachers weren't necessarily well aware of the different types of questions that were available on the IABs or the actual grade 5 and 8 test. I took them through different question types, describing the difference between a cluster question and then our single item question. You can go to the next slide. I found it very helpful, especially at the elementary level, to have teachers in grades 3, 4, and 5 play with the actual assessment interim blocks. with my teachers. They were shocked to find how difficult some of these interim assessments were, specifically our third and fourth grade teachers who don't get a chance to see the fifth grade students grapple with them. We considered this to be an important high leverage strategy in Greenwich because our teachers in grades 3-4, the content that is presented there obviously is fair game for assessment in grade 5. You can go to the next slide. In our district, one of the strongest tools for doing this work is creating an easy to read guide of our assessments, specifically one that focuses on the actual phenomena labeled on the assessments. Those of you who have explored the assessments online probably know that specifically the NGSS grade 5 ones have a whole lot of IABs with some funky names with letters, numbers, etc. I put those into English layman terms for our 3-5 teachers so they can easily find which one is the circuit doorbell or the dog tilted head. This was met with some great success for my teachers. You can go to the next slide. Another tip that I gave our grades 3-5 teachers is using intentional talk around the academic and scientific language used on the IABs and in turn the NGSS test. We created a list of commonly used terms throughout all of the IABs, and we ask our teachers to use these terms throughout their instructional practices, not only during IAB exposure, but in general terms for when they're teaching their science lessons. Many teachers have then printed this list and added them to word walls in their classrooms. Next slide. We leave teachers with a few more resources. We gave them 8 different ways that they can use IABs that don't include individual student logins, including Think Aloud, guided work with teachers, in pairs or using competition. We also asked teachers to assign a bunch of IABs, have students choose ones that sound interesting to them. They'll work in groups or work on skill focused. For example, we'll post all of the IABs that include a simulation or all of the IABs that force you to graph. We'll use them in different ways like that. Next slide. And then for our youngest learners, or especially students with exceptionalities, we give them a chance to do a little bit of metacognition around the assessments. We give teachers student work guides that are printed alongside their Chromebooks as they're working on their IABs. It helps students take a step back, slow down, get to know their assessment, and ask questions of their peers or teachers. And that's it for grades 3-5. Next slide. In grades 6-8, as I said earlier, we have curriculum embedded IABs, increase expectations for teachers, and then supports that I've given as their coordinator. Next slide. Throughout our unit progression, we include areas when an IAB would make most sense to be administered, and then we give teachers access to the answer key, instructions for retrieving, directions to see student results, etc. These are all hyperlinked each time you'll hit an IAB after a performance expectation has been instructed. Next slide. At monthly program meetings, we check in on how our IABs are going. Teachers report out on whether or not their students met them with success, met them with difficulty, or didn't get to them at all, because we all know time is precious and sometimes pacing can be hard. An IAB often takes longer than the one period I've planned for it, as you guys I'm sure know. Next slide. And finally, I help out doing some month of test reminders. So I'm deployed in buildings in March, April, and May to support students in their test prep weeks. Next slide. This includes talking through the tools embedded on the test itself. Some of these reminders are important, including collapsing sides, looking from left to right for supporting data or evidence, reading carefully, using the term your task at the bottom of our IABs, and using some of the embedded supports such as the periodic table, calculator, or highlight tool. Next slide. We also ask teachers to post some of the screen records of each of these tools onto Google Classroom so students have continual access to review them on their own. I went ahead and I made screen recordings of some of our most tricky assessment IAB types, including tables and boxes, graphs, arrows and drawing tools, or understanding trials in a simulation, including deleting trials when you get too many. Next slide. Now, as you can imagine, like anything in education, this has left for some sticky spots. The utmost and most common supporting structure that teachers don't find they have is the amount of time to deploy the IABs effectively and then go back and ensure that students get it. We're always pressed for time. So in order to kind of support our teachers, we did narrow down the number that they should be using. We tell them which ones to use that best match our instructional support. And I went ahead and did a crosswalk to make sure that the ones that I, so to speak, require or highly recommend within our curriculum do cover all of the different types of tools that we know students have difficulty with, including things like trials, simulations, or using the graphing and table tools. And final slide. But we've also met some great successes. We have our students enjoying getting on there, especially using them in terms of competition or trying their best on different ones. We like that when the students have finished an IAB, they want to know the answer key. Did they get it all right? Our teachers are finding this to be an important point of collaboration. And we found a lot of vertical alignment and conversation between grades 3, 4, and 5 teachers with our grades 6, 7, and 8 teachers. That's something that we're really proud of in the district, and that's something that we hope to continue to do moving forward. And my final slide, I just wanted to open it up to anyone on today or who may check out this recording later on. Please feel free to come visit Greenwich and see what we're doing around IABs. Email me or reach out. I'd love to share more of what is working and what we're still working through.
Thank you so much, Tara. That was really informative. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat throughout the presentation. I think we'll wait for questions and discussion until after we hear from all 3 presenters. So right now, we're going to turn it over to Rachel Manzer from Winchester, and she's going to share some of their experiences with the interims.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. And what I'm hoping is that you are going to gain some tips and tools from all 3 presenters that are presenting today. And Tara, I strongly recommend to everyone creating your own spreadsheet with the common names. That has probably been the most useful tool for our district. Now, Winchester is a pre-K through 6 district, so that's important as we go through that some of these tips may work for your district and some of them may not. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to be going over today is I'm going to go over 3 different ways that we really focus on interim assessments in science. I'm going to talk about professional development. I'm going to talk about curriculum integration. And I'm also going to talk about how they are used in the classroom. So to start off, we're going to be going right to our ongoing professional development. We have ongoing professional development with the NGSS interns throughout the year for many years. One of the first things that we did as an entire staff is to really look at what were the essential elements of an NGSS aligned assessment, in particular in terms, but even broader. So we knew that they need to be focused on phenomena or problem. We know that they have to engage students in sense making. We know that they have to use both the practices and be involved with the science ideas. Also know they have to be understandable to students, and that's really an important one. But the most important one is that they have to serve a purpose. One of the things that we did is we used the science task screener, which you can see on the slide, and we'll put it in the chat for you, for staff to be able to understand the elements or what makes a good 3-dimensional science assessment. And by doing that, by evaluating other assessments and also by writing their own, it gave them a stronger understanding of what 3-dimensional assessments are. Now, why this piece is important, because that leads directly to those interns. So one of the things we do with our ongoing professional development is we want them, all the staff, to be familiar with the NGS interns. So we want them to know what we are asking the students to do. So together, the educators came together and we went over them one by one. We looked at essential elements. We looked at the vocabulary to be asked. And together we were looking at, well, which ones do you think we want to use and which ones don't we? But the whole goal of this was to be able to deepen the teacher's understanding and knowledge, and also to provide some ownership of these NGSS interns. So another piece of our ongoing professional development is also being able to collaboratively review and select the interns for use at the various grade levels. So we do give them out at 3, 4, and 5th grade and 6th grade and so forth. But what we want to do is we look at them again as a team to determine what is the purpose, what is the intention, why are we giving it? We're not just giving it to give it. And the last part of our ongoing professional development is really in the analysis of the assessments. So when we give them throughout the year, what is that shared understanding? Are they meeting the intended purpose that we set out? Can we use them to be able to inform instruction? So those 4 elements that you are seeing that are on the screen is what we do with the ongoing professional development. Now, some of the challenges with that has been new staff. As many of our schools, we've had a lot of turnover. And, how do we keep this training, repeat this training, especially that essential elements one going? So that's been a little bit of a challenge, but we made it to work. The other one is time. How do you find time to be able to go to analyze the results of some of the interns, or become more familiar when these interns go out, or, hey, let's talk about what that purpose is. But we find the time, whether it's common planning, whether it's staff meetings, whether it's actually professional development days, we find the time, because what we have found is that the benefits of ongoing professional development on interim assessments, whether it's kind of, your traditional delivery or whether it's conversations about it, is tremendously beneficial. And the benefits definitely outweigh any barrier that we have come across. So we'll get across those barriers. Next slide, please. So beyond the ongoing professional development we do, the other thing is the integration into our curriculum. So when we're talking about the integration, we don't put the interns at the end of a unit. We have them woven into our units. We want it to be those interim assessments. Our goal is to make them actually a natural part of instruction. The phenomena in them are engaging enough for the students that they're really interested in doing them. And sometimes, like I said, as you'll see later on, we expand upon it to make it even more interesting. And, by making it a natural part of the instruction within the units themselves, that benefit has paid off because the students are excited to do them. In fact, every year in 4th grade, the students are always bummed, sad, depressed because they don't get to take the 5th grade summative test. It's always funny that they want to do it. So, but having it a natural part of instruction has made a big difference in how we do that. The other thing is purpose. We've been talking about purpose. Well, you're going to hear a little bit more for that. And the other thing I'm going to talk about with the integration is that this is a part of our assessment system. It's not one piece. It is part of a more comprehensive assessment system. Next slide, please. So when we were talking about purpose, we were talking about, well, why are we doing the interim? We're not doing just the interim assessment to do the interim assessment. We don't do them all. We have a purpose, and we want to know what we want before we actually give them. So for example, some of them we use as in reinforce information. Some of them we use as an instructional tool. Others we may use as to introduce a new tool, or like a drop-down box, or how do you put that arrow in, or how do you fill in that bar graph. In some cases, it's familiarization for the teachers or for the students. Some cases, it may be to understand an analogous or a parallel phenomena. But in some cases, it may be to actually evaluate individual learning or groups of student learning. So when you're looking at the interns, I think one of the biggest recommendations I can give is, besides the spreadsheet, like Tara mentioned, is that they definitely need to have a purpose for them. Because after all, the goal is to improve student learning. So that's what our focus, we want to know what our focus is before we give them. Like I mentioned, we do embed them into our instruction. It is a part of our units. They don't come at the end. They're purposely chosen as part of our instruction. And I will talk a little bit more of what that looks like in the classroom with some of the classroom activities. But in addition to that, just kind of a reminder that our students, our classrooms are so diverse, and that we wanted to make sure that there's multiple modes of engagement with these interim assessments, and you're going to see some of that also in the next slide. So next slide, please. All right, so how do we use them in the classroom? Well, I'm going to give you some basic examples, but I'm going to tell you that it depends upon purpose. So again, remember, these are embedded within our curriculum. In some cases in the classroom, we have small groups working on them. And what is amazing is the discourse that's coming out of it as students are talking about the interim. And it's not only getting the right answer, that's not the scope, but it's able to give rationale for why the other answers are wrong. So the small discourse is one method I would strongly suggest using in the classroom for the interns. Another way we use them is that we do use them to conduct hands-on investigations. For example, there is an intern that talks about a door that has an alarm on it. And well, we build lessons all about that. The students are building circuits, they're designing alarms, they're designing light bulbs that go off and switches and things like that. So we actually design lessons around the interns. And the kids think that's so cool because, like I said, their goal is to be a natural part of instruction. So it flows together beautifully. In addition to that, we also, besides the building lessons and conducting hands-on investigations on them, we try to show some additional real-world connections to them. We build off of them. So there is an intern that's on salinity. And so we do a lot of experiments with salinity, and they're making different solutions of different salinity, and they go and do the interim, again, all a part of the unit. And what they do next is we then apply it to Long Island Sound. So again, stretching it out further that, hey, this is just not a test. This is part of what we do. We have used them as launches for our own research. Example of that would be, there's one on flamingos and how flamingos, the color of flamingo depends upon the food. Well, the students did an investigation all about spoonbills, which is a type of bird and the food they eat. And they've done investigations about research about other animals and what they eat and how that could affect their coloration. Sometimes we do the questions together as a large group and discuss. I find that those are often done when we're trying to introduce a new tool. If we're trying to introduce the highlighting tool or how to draw an arrow or something like that. And then, as I mentioned, there are times that we do assess them. Some cases we assess how did they progress on this? How did the group do on that? But it all comes back down to purpose. What's the purpose? And why are you doing it? So one of the things I do want to recommend, again, this is a part of a comprehensive assessment system where, we have performance assessments, we have the summative assessments, we have the interim assessments, we have a lot more than just this, but it's part of a system. And as science teachers, and teachers that teach science, we all know that systems work together to be able to make a bigger picture. So that's some of the tricks that, well, I shouldn't say tricks, the strategies that we use interim assessments for. And if you have any questions at the end, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Rachel's been involved with our assessment development in a number of fronts for quite a while now. She loves to talk about assessment, so don't hesitate to ask questions or reach out to her at some point as well. So we also want to hear from another district. This is Berlin Public Schools and Adam Leonard. We'll turn it over to you, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I am the science department supervisor in Berlin on the secondary level. So we've heard really through K-8 at this point. So hoping to expand a little bit for the high school level group that is in here. One of the things that is really important is that our district was, before the use of interim assessments, was sort of mid-level performing. And the interim assessments are such a valuable tool. So if you just head to the next slide, please. In 2022, we had 60% of students, this is in grade 11, at level 3 or 4, and between 2022 and 2023, we had a 12% jump. So it's really showing that the students are able to demonstrate the skills that are needed to perform well in this assessment, truly show their understanding of the science content and be able to apply that really well. Next slide, please. So I'm relatively new in my role. So it's actually, I was thinking back, it's now 3 years ago. The role changed from 9-12 supervisor to 6-12. So that really provided a fantastic opportunity for me. The first thing that I did is I started a secondary science vertical team. So I got teachers from every grade level and every course. We met together and we talked. What do we need? What's it going to look like? What's the continuum going to look like? We had dedicated PD time, which was extremely valuable. We heard from the 2 other districts that there's a handy spreadsheet that each of them have made, and we made our own. It's funny how we all come to these same conclusions, but we developed our own curriculum matrix, which not only shows it by course at the high school, because those of you at the high school level know, once you get past 9th grade, it's kind of like a spaghetti plot as to where the kids can go and what paths they take. So what students take in 11th grade, there could be 4 or 5 different courses here. So that could look different in each course. So we developed that curriculum matrix, which was really important. So we just started, what standards do we have? What's being met at each grade level? And then later on, we evaluated the degree that each standard was being taught, and we'll be able to see that in a moment. The other thing that we did is we also aligned the interim assessments with those particular units. So like we heard in the other districts, they're embedded within the curriculum. Next slide, please. So here is a screenshot of our curriculum matrix. So over on the left, in column A, you have all the standards. Those are hyperlinked to the actual NGSS site with the standards there. We also have clarification statements put in as comments. So if the teacher were to highlight over one of those, we've included the assessment boundaries, which is really important, especially at the high school level, because we can go really, really deep and far on some content areas. For example, I don't know, Kepler's laws, going into that, and that's limited as an example to 2-body systems. You can see the kind of at a glance what the standard is, and then in the purple, if you look at that, you can see what courses we have and where those standards are being hit. This allowed us to really do an audit on our curriculum to see, are there certain standards that are being, not that you can really do in education, but over addressed? Like, are they being taught in too many places? Or more importantly, are there gaps? So we took those gaps and we aligned them in yellow. If you look there, that just simply says, is there an interim assessment? Is it a cluster or standalone? And kind of in a nutshell, like we saw with the other districts, what is it about? So if you look at ESS 1-2, the second row across, that's about spectra and Hubble's law. So then the instructors, the teachers can go in and say, oh, I've got one aligned with X particular unit at that time. Next slide, please. And then here's the big change that happened, is we decided to include them in the teacher evaluation. So not only having teachers being exposed to them that first year, you saw we met 60% of goal, and that was okay. But once we tied them into the teacher evaluation, then we knew that those interim assessments were really being used with fidelity within each of the courses. So it was kind of worded extremely vaguely. You can see it says students' average performance on NGSS interim assessments will demonstrate growth. We had a target of 4 or more. So that is something that we still hold 4 or more. There's some teachers who do 8. There's some who do the minimum 4. But the important part is that the students are becoming familiar and the teachers are becoming familiar with the platform. They understand the tools that are embedded. They know how to navigate the system. And then when it comes actual time for the NGSS assessment for us in April, it's going to be very easy for them to get in and they know exactly what's going on. Another thing that we really want to focus on was not only for students to show growth, but more importantly, to build stamina. So as we've seen in today's society, attention spans get shorter and shorter and shorter. And I know this, I'm looking at this presentation, it's already 42 minutes long. So our attention spans are generally shorter. So do students have the capacity to read all that complex, big information on the left side, right? On that left-hand pane and go through that and really look at it critically. So once they started to build stamina, we noticed that student performance increased tremendously. Our second IAGD that we had been focusing on was about the SEPs, so the science and engineering practices. And how did we decide which of those to use? Because there's 8 of them. We can look at the next slide. Next slide, please. What we did, this is at McGee Middle School, is we looked at, okay, here's our SEP performance. Minus signs are bad, right? Equal is on par with the rest of the tests. Pluses would be great. But as an example, DM here on this particular slide stands for developing models, right? Developing and using models. CE is constructing explanations, so on and so forth. So the students, the teachers at McGee, their IAGD2 goal was all about developing models because the previous year's group of students didn't quite hit the mark on that. So that informs us that that's an area that we need to focus on as a 6-8 team. You can go on to the next slide, please. At Berlin High School, you notice that we have proficient are the check marks, which means we hit those. So what we did there, because we have a huge variety of courses, 9 through 11 that students can take, is that the students, I keep saying that, the teachers are thinking about their students and what their particular needs were. So on a 9th grade level, maybe we want to focus more on the constructing explanations and developing models, and really they chose amongst themselves, and this is on the previous year's data from NGSS that's available on the centralized reporting system. Next slide, please. Okay, the big thing that I've heard, and we heard it from the 2 other districts, was that you just don't throw this at the class and say, everyone's sitting there individual, you're gonna dive in and complete this and do your best, kid. That's not how it works. Like anything else in teaching, it starts with the modeling, right? So the teachers, what we typically do here, at least on the high school level, is we model it with the class. We'll usually choose one that's a little more challenging to get them through the workflow on how do we analyze what is given to us and how do we figure out what the task is and how we're going to get our responses. After the modeling, then we do that partner practice, and that is a fantastic thing because it involves real-time problem solving. Like we heard from the other districts, you hear the students communicating with each other, working at the problem live, and that really makes some things click in the heads of some students as to what do I need to do to tackle this. After that, the students go on to complete individually. We provide increasing feedback and opportunities as we go throughout the year. So we start out sort of slow, and then we ramp it up as we go along. And then, like I said before, it helps everyone, teachers and students, to be familiar with the platform and what it looks like. Next slide, please. Some of our challenges is that, first off, we are a one-on-one district for devices, so students are issued Chromebooks. However, there's an increasing trend for students to bring in their own devices, and for us to administer the interim assessments, they need to be on the secure browser. So now we've resorted to like a testing cart kind of thing, like back in the day, you have a testing cart. So now we have that available to our teaching staff so that they can bring that cart into their classroom as needed. This is something that has kind of come along if your district is familiar with Securely, that essentially allows you to monitor the student screen during assessments. Students don't like that so much, so they end up getting their own devices. So this is something that we ran into as an issue. The other thing was, just frankly, finding interim assessments that fully align with the curriculum. So there's, as all of you know, there's a lot of cross-cutting concepts in here. So any interim assessment is going to involve some other standard in some way, and finding something that's completely aligned to what the teachers are doing, and that's why curriculum is a work in progress, right? It has to be constantly revisited, and we need to revise and improve the line, right? So those are the things that we work on. So we're sort of, I think, if we're in comparison to the other districts, I think we're in a little earlier stage as to maybe where they were a year or two ago. Next slide, please. So our next steps is, one of the super helpful things is that you guys provide the answer keys right in Tide, and they have, and if you didn't know this, they have all the SCPs already identified in there. So when I have the teachers working on their IAGD2 and it's on the SCP for developing models, well, let's look at all the ones with that. So in our curriculum matrix, what we're going to do next, our next PD time where we have the opportunity, is align those SCPs. So then we could see not only what standard it is, what the topic it is, but what SCP it's primarily focusing on. And then this will allow us to, further drill down into what is exactly needed. The other thing that I saw in other districts from this presentation that I really liked is that you have what is actually administered in each grade level. I know it might be a little easier at grade 4 or 5 or whatever, for example, versus the high school, but I think that's a good next step for us. So this way we're not duplicating, right? We don't want to duplicate the same interim assessments with the students. In some instances that might be okay, but we don't want them to do that every year, for example, going 9, 10, 11. One of the other things that has been extremely helpful for us also, just through our professional development time is we have a online learning platform, Schoology. We're able to develop our own assessments in there that have similar items like drop-down menu items and so on and so forth, creating graphs, things like that. And we're actually able to tag the SEPs to them and the standards, and that allows Schoology to make its own nice little magical spreadsheet, and teachers are able to track that. As you know, with teacher evaluation plans and all that, the data collection can be cumbersome, and that makes things a little easier for the staff. We also have a program, I'm not advertising and nor am I paid for this, but we use Gizmos, which is a nice online simulation that is aligned with the NGSS standards, and it gives the students just another way to manipulate digitally, since the whole assessment is digital, and kind of go about making their conclusions, data analysis, so on and so forth, just in a different platform. And then, of course, as always, we're going to continuously move along with our secondary science vertical team. Any chance we get, we use, and we continue our work. Thank you. Next slide.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Adam. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all of our presenters. It was great to hear, Adam, that you're one of the districts, at least, and I'm sure others are using the newer reporting system related to the practices that we developed for the NGSS assessments. In case some aren't aware, those results are available for the aggregate level, classroom, school districts, in those groupings of practices, which I think is a little different look at the assessment results from just, say, life or physical. So it's great to see that you're using those and incorporating them into your sort of programs there. So questions, again, feel free to add anything in the chat. We had one question, which maybe we can address and talk about a little bit. But also, if you have any questions, you want to raise your hand, or if you just want to come off mic, again, any questions, anything you want to share about your own use of the interims, any challenges you're facing, anything for our presenters, that would be great to hear from you. We'll wait just a little bit here for folks to ask questions if they want. Adam, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, it's odd for me to raise my hand, but I had a question for Tara. How did you rank the difficulty level? I noticed it was like, I want to say 1 through 5 or something along those lines.
Yeah, we actually had the students fill out a Google form after doing a bunch of them. We compiled those results. We were like, okay, which one of these were the hardest from your lens? So we said 1, not so hard, 5, super duper hard. What we found is that the standalones are always a little bit less hard, even though sometimes those questions can be quite tricky. And they usually ranked those simulation or multi-part cluster questions as more difficult, but those rankings came from students. We did have teachers also kind of discuss anecdotally how they felt each of the IABs were, but those rankings came from a student perspective at baseline.
Now, did you find that those rankings sort of held up with what the students actually did when they took the interims? Or was this after they did them?
It's after they did them, and it's after they did them in a slew of different modalities. So it wasn't necessarily them independently logging in. It could have been them just working with partners. So I don't have information whether their ranking matches their performance.
That's fine. Yeah, I know one of the challenges we have with the interims, because it's not a full and complete system. It doesn't have all of the information and features that, say, the Smarter Balance system has. But one of them is a little bit of a lack of information about the difficulty of the items and how to translate that type of thing. So that is an interesting and unique way to look at it. Last chance. We just have a few minutes left here. Any remaining questions or comments from anyone? I have a couple more slides.
I see one in the chat about answer keys, and then I saw Abe went ahead and located it.
Oh, okay. Yep.
The only piece I didn't really touch on, and maybe this would happen a little bit more in one of your other sessions, but being a 3 through 5 coordinator with some counterparts in math and ELA. We also looked at this kind of more holistically of what is the student doing throughout the course of the year when it comes to interims, because I was almost hammering my teachers when I first started the coordinator role of like, let's expose to IABs in science, especially third, fourth, fifth. And then we were finding that this is also happening in the lens of ELA and in math. So we took a step back this year to say, okay, on a month-to-month basis, how many times are our students having to log in independently into an IAB or one of the separate ones that they have in ELA and math? And we kind of said, okay, we don't want this to happen more than 3 or 4 times within the course of a month, even if it's a short half hour here and there. We just looked at this holistically as well, which proved to be important, not only from the teacher lens, they were appreciative of that, but our students' feedback, there was less reluctance and less of the collective sigh that you'll hear in a classroom when they have to click the button, can you play this sound? And the music that plays when you log on to the IAB, so the students were like, no, not again. That has kind of diminished now that we've looked at this more holistically.
So great, thanks. So there is another question in the chat about new IABs, new interims being added. We are always looking to add new interim items every year. That's the goal. And if you know anything about how the NGSS assessments are being developed, we do it in coordination with about 12 other states. So all the states are developing items. Most of those items, of course, go into our summative tests, that item pool. But every year we do take some of the items from the pool and we move them into the interims. So again, giving you more and more items every year, hopefully, is our goal. We constantly do item development, and if any of you or your educators are interested in that process and joining our committee, you're welcome to do so. The question also sort of addressed some of the real world phenomenon and familiarity with some students, that type of thing. Again, the use of real world phenomenon is an important part of the whole NGSS science program and standards. So it's important that we include those and incorporate those into our items and into the interims as well. Student backgrounds are going to vary. We know that. All of our items have lots of supports in place, for students. We give a lot of information within the items so that students that have less familiarity with something, have access into that content, into those phenomenon to understand what's going on. They're not always perfect, but that's sort of the reality of when you're dealing with phenomenon and stuff. You have to deal with some of those issues. But I think what most folks find is the more experience that students have with dealing with those phenomenon, the more comfortable they become with, dealing with something maybe they haven't seen before. Maybe that's something that's new to them, and they can think their way through it as they look at the information that's provided in the items.
I'm just going to grade it based on what you have, okay?
So we just have a couple more slides. We'll go ahead and move on. We just have a couple more minutes here. So just a couple additional resources to support the use of the NGSS interims. These include the quick guide, which is really the guide for the administration of the items, and the centralized reporting system guide, which goes over all of the results and how you can view them for both the summative and the interim assessment items. So those guides are available for you, and they're both available through our web portal. Next slide, Abe. We've also created, if you're looking for additional classroom science assessments, and one or two of our presenters mentioned that, so we've developed a list of various projects around the country that include some different assessments, different assessment item types, from multiple choice all the way through extended performance tasks. And so we have that list available through the link here. And there are lots of great resources out there. If you've never checked out Contextus, if you want to go back one second, Abe, in the center there, that's a newer site I would definitely recommend. It's not the most user-friendly site, but if you go there, you can find what they call sort of an assessment library, which is basically a spreadsheet that includes over 600 performance tasks from all sorts of projects around the country. And they have lots of sort of meta information about each task, what grade, what standard, what practice they're associated with, that type of thing. So it's really a great place to go and look for tasks if you want to incorporate some others from different projects. And last slide is just, again, if you want to go to the next slide, just a final thank you again to our presenters, certainly, and to all of you for joining us today. if you have any questions, anything that comes up afterwards, please reach out to us. You can reach out to us at the general phone number or email, or if you have any specific questions about the science assessments, please email me and I'll be happy to get back to you. So thanks again, and let's see. I see one question in the chat here. Just an easier way to sort of access the IABs, that type of thing. We're always looking for new suggestions and new ideas. I know Cambium has started working on organizing the screen when you go into the IABs. Right now, it's just sort of a list is kind of hard to find things. I know they're going to be working on a better organization for that, so that might be helpful with regard to that. So on that note, thank you so much, everyone, and I wish you all the best the rest of the day and the rest of the school year. Bye now.